What is up, everybody? This is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook video about modern U.S. slavery and the chain breakers. This is a video about modern U.S. slavery from Alabama prisons to the entire African continent, among other continents, and some of the resistance that we are currently seeing, the liberation movements, historically and in the present. And yeah, I just wanted to focus on specifically, the present state of the U.S. slavery, as well as the history of U.S. slavery. Obviously, highlighting the fact that the slavery is not over, which the United States, among other Western countries that collaborate with the United States, would like to pretend, and they like to make accusations of forced labor and of unjust use of unjust exploitation and unjust use of chained up, incarcerated, unfree workers. However you want to call that. Who is called a slave, and who gets to be called a or who gets to be classified as a underpaid worker, and who gets to be classified as a slave, or who, even like whether you are enslaved or not. A lot of that is very much wrapped up in geopolitics, history of racism, who is selected to be the unpaid working class on the plantations, historical and today. Obviously, the racial component is inseparable from that. So, but there's also slaves of various kinds, although disproportionately they're obviously black in the world generally, and in the United States, and black and brown, and etc. But so we'll get into that as we move forward. I want to start with this article. Actually, give me one short second. I'm going to just fix something, and I'll be right back in 5 seconds. Sorry, I was getting distracted by something. So yeah, Alabama this past week has there was recently an article, so I can get that specific article. There was an article about the Alabama prisoners, and the whole state is profiting off of these. They are profiting off of these prisoners and using them in McDonald's. They're using the prisoners in hotels as janitors all over the place. They're technically so they're like, when you go to McDonald's, order your McDouble or your McChicken or your small French fries or whatever, your hash browns. Yeah, here it is. You could be, the clerk, the French fry fryer, the person putting the all beef patties, special sauce, pickle, lettuce, shredded lettuce, flurry on top of your Big Mac. That could be a slave. I'm sorry, underpaid, unfree, incarcerated worker. The United States has the world's largest prison population. We should say that before we keep going. The United States has the world's largest prison population, with over 2.5 million incarcerated forced labor workers, and it still has slavery, basically. The 14th Amendment didn't abolish slavery. It only altered the specific circumstances under which you can use slavery, but the U.S. still has slavery. And it can never be understated that so are you okay, computer? Sorry, I was having a little glitch here. Anyways, so in Alabama, the man frying chicken at KFC, the woman making beds in Holiday Inn could be a prisoner. The state earns millions leasing inmates to hundreds of companies, deeming them safe enough to work, but routinely denying them parole. So, and then somebody commented, leasing inmates. You mean slavery? So I mean, yeah, I mean that is what it is. Um, a storm was looming when the inmate serving 20 years for armed robbery was assigned to transport fellow prisoners to their jobs at private manufacturers supplying goods to companies like Home Depot and Wayfair. It didn't matter that Jake Jones once had escaped or that he had failed 2 drug and alcohol tests while in lockup. He was unsupervised and technically in charge. By the time Jones was driving back to the work release center with 6 other incarcerated workers, it was a pelting rain. He had a reputation for driving fast, and some of his passengers said he was racing along the country road, jamming to music and earbuds. Suddenly, the transport van hit a dip and swerved on the wet pavement, slamming into a tree. 2 men died after being thrown out of the van, and Jones, who was critically hurt and slumped over the blaring horn, had to be cut out of the vehicle. As other men staggered into the storm to flag down help, why would the Alabama Department of Corrections place their lives in Jones' hands? They knew he had a propensity to drink, said Sean Waston, who survived the crash, and then they put him behind the wheel of a van. Anyway, no state has a longer, more profit-driven history of contracting prisoners out to private companies than Alabama, with a sprawling labor system that dates back more than 150 years, including brutal convict leasing era that replaced slavery. It has constructed a template for the commercialization of mass incarceration. Because obviously 150 years ago, right? I mean, it's approximately when after the Civil War and the 14th Amendment and the abolition of slavery, except in the cases of punishment for a crime. That's the United States. That is the United States' official legal status, right? The legal status of slavery is slavery is fine as long as somebody had, let me get that exactly in case somebody says Silver Speak, you got well, actually you missed the little T crossing or I dotting. I don't want to ask AI right now. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Wait, where did it go? 14th Amendment. Yeah, no state shall where? No state shall make or enforce any law that shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the laws. Representatives shall be apportioned. Wait. Okay, this. Where does it get to the slavery? Yeah. Yeah, so it's a long, complicated mess, but no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Basically supposedly abolishes slavery. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person with its jurisdiction the. Am I getting the wrong amendment? I'm in the wrong one. Okay, I'm sorry. It's the 13th Amendment. I'm getting that wrong. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution says that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for the crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. I was like, something is wrong with this amendment. I was like, I'm misremembering the 13th and 14th. So technically, right, you can't be enslaved in the United States unless it's not necessarily whether you have done a crime, it's whether the United States has decided you have committed a crime, right? I mean, and just to bring this to the present, right? Uh, right. So I just want to, just a side note. Um, we need clickbait, so let's put hot people on the screen getting perp walked by the third largest military in the world, NYPD, which is trained by Isn't Real, convicted GENOCIDERS. Uh, so so uh, so technically, Mario's brother could be serving your slave labor McChickens and Tice and your KFC, this week. I mean, because but and I also want to point out, obviously that's Luigi Mangione, but um, I made another post related to this. I mean, I know this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but I want to make a point about why. Because some people will say, well, I mean, if you committed a crime, that is perfect. You have given up your right to, you have given up your other rights, because now you've committed a crime, right? You have hurt other people. You have broken your part of the social contract. Now other people don't have to respect your rights. So now you get to be a slave, or you can be used as slave labor. That's some people will argue that. Um but the thing is, right, that assumes that, well, actually there's many problems with that. Number one, that just because people have done something wrong, like nonviolent marijuana usage or something, which is the reason why many thousands of people are in prison, especially black and brown people, right? Kamala Harris cackled her, her wicked witch of the West, and by the West I mean the West Coast of California. Kamala Harris cackled her wicked witch of the West laugh while locking up her own black people, and insisting on keeping them in as long as possible. While she was admitted to smoking marijuana, a lot of it, and said anyone who has ever smoked marijuana, should be in as long as possible. And she, in fact, she pushed and lobbied to extend nonviolent marijuana users prison terms, because, and she said, we need the prison labor. So she was a advocate for this, right? And also related, how does that relate to the current situation with the quote unquote suspected UHC shooter? All it did, because obviously this week we've had this suspected Luigi Mangione of the UHC shooting, right, was being paraded around by NYPD. I mean, how can we not comment on this? In a catastrophic photo op, anti-photo op for the United States, the U.S., the capitalist system, and the cops. Making, they basically did, like some people pointed out, they've done a free, like, Superman perp walk. It's basically lionizes the person they're walking, right? They have this unarmed guy in an orange jumpsuit. He looks like a scene from the Joker. All this is doing is increasing the likability and of the UHC shooter suspect, Luigi Mangione, and it is increasing the hatred and anger against the U.S. Healthcare companies, NYPD, the New York City, New York State, the mayor Eric Adams, who's over there marching around like he's doing anything useful, and all this says to millions of Americans going bankrupt and dying from U.S. death care industry is, if you unalive a rich executive, isn't real trained U.S. cops. And that is, they train with the IDF and by the IDF. Isn't real trained U.S. cops will not catch you but lie and parade a random person on TV, claiming they quote unquote got a TERRORIST, just like their teachers, right? Because that's what we know that that horrible entity in the Middle East does, right? They don't, right? They point to a calendar somewhere in a hospital and they go, here is a list of all of this murder, all these horrible people, right? These horrible atrocity doers, right? Remember that? And then, but actually, the calendar, the list of names was just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But but it was in another language, right? And they're like, here is the weapons, right? They're pointing to here are the mass. This week is here are all the mass graves, right? But it was just a cemetery, right? And that's the same people that are conducting all this mass unaliving. So and those people, one of the top current live streamed atrocity doers, right? Their soldiers train the United States police forces, including NYPD. And all they do, they don't catch, like I think I pointed this out in the last two streams. They don't catch criminals. They don't solve crimes, right? They don't stop violence, right? They're there to oppress people, to beat up the innocent, for plunder, for colonial and capitalist plunder, and to steal land and houses and just they just ransack. They're just thieves. They're just violent murder. They're barbarians. They just run through areas, take everything they can, and then lie about everything they've just done. It's just colonialism, this is just right ultimately. But they train the police of the United States, so the police, also don't solve crimes. As we also saw this week, the police, what do? There was a big strike, right, with Amazon workers and Starbucks workers on strike. And what did the police do, right? So I can get an image of that. Yeah, and so the police, right? The police broke the strike lines. That's the purpose of the police. The purpose of the police is to beat up on working class people, right? Whether they are enslaved in prison or, right, incarcerated working class, or out on the street working class, right, or just not in prison working class. The purpose of the cops is to beat up on those people, especially when they ask for, when the workers rattle their cage and like do collective mass action to try to get better pay and conditions for themselves. That is what the police were made for. That is what they always have been made for. The police, the cops, are the enforcers of the will of the organized, the mass organization. Also, sometimes at a highest enough level, is called the government. Right? The police carry out its will, and in the will of the United States is a racist capitalist plutocracy. So the police do that bidding, which is to, and what the corporations, right, Amazon, the millionaire billionaire class, what they want, what they pay the salaries of the cops, because virtually all U.S. policy is governed by money. That's what a plutocracy is. So then the police do whatever the rich and the corporations want, which is to break through strike lines, which is to crush strikers, which is to catch slaves, also known as prisoners. Right? The United States police were founded as a slave catching force, and that's still what they do. They catch prisoners because a prisoner can be paid 25 cents or 0 cents per hour. A worker, difference between a incarcerated worker and a not incarcerated worker. The incarcerated worker can be paid 0 cents per hour and has to be exactly where the power structures and the prison guards and the police say they have to be, right? A not incarcerated worker can move around more and can be paid $7 an hour. That's really the difference, right? But you're not free. You're still not really free, even as a not prisoner slave, right? If you're not serving time in a federal penitentiary or in Rikers or in Angola, or in Alcatraz then, or wherever, or in an Alabama, if you're not in an Alabama correction facility being paid 25 cents an hour to be in chains serving McDoubles and Whoppers, right? There's, you're more obviously not free, but even when you're outside, you are still a slave to your rent. You're a slave to your landlord, your land slave master, right? Because if you don't pay that rent, you're homeless and you're destitute. You're still a slave to your wage slave. You're a slave to your food costs, which can be like $20 for a loaf of bread nowadays with the inflation going towards hyperinflation that is happening. You are a slave to your medical costs. That's why not Luigi Mangione, but the United Healthcare Claims Adjuster took direct, violent, extreme action because of exorbitant healthcare costs, right? You are not free from the healthcare costs. You can walk around, but you will go to your job, or you will die from needed basic surgeries, right? And chemo and cancer meds or insulin. You will do it either way. So there is no freedom. And under a capitalist system, there is no ultimate freedom. But there's extreme versions of that. It's kind of like making the conditions in whole or in part constitutes GENOCIDE, right? So in GAZA, in the Middle East, there is a live streamed mass GENOCIDE, right? But the killing is not what makes it GENOCIDE. That's the extreme, horrible, most horrific form is what's happening right now. So starvation, shooting, bombing, blowing up schools, hospitals. That's what they're still doing. But even before that, right? Cutting the calories into GAZA, when the U.S.-backed entity was starving people, is still at what it was already starving people slowly, right? Inside of the open air prison that was GAZA. That's still right. That's just, but it's not as extreme a form as when they're just blowing people up and shooting them. But similarly, whether you're in prison or you're out of prison in the U.S., you are still not free. Either way, you're just way less free in the prison. So I just want to point that out. And the police do the bidding of the ruling class, and that's very important to point out. And that's what they're doing right now when it comes to these strikes. Okay, let's move on. Because I started late because I was thinking about what I was gonna say today. But okay. So yeah, and so and the point I was dovetailing off from is that committing a crime. I would argue that committing a crime in the United States, right? I mean, according to the 14th Amendment, right? According to the 14th Amendment, I keep mixing the 13 and 14. According to the 13th Amendment, you can be enslaved and do forced slave labor as a prisoner if you, as a punishment for a crime, right? But the part that's missing there is that the United States doesn't punish the biggest criminals, right? Because people like the CEO of United Healthcare, the now unalive Brian Thompson, right? If the United States punished criminals, Brian Thompson would have been in prison already, along with thousands of other extremely wealthy, mostly cis white straight guys, but not exclusively, right? Joe Biden would be in prison. Right, Joe Biden could be punished with forced labor, right? Because he has committed war crimes. He's committed all kinds of crimes. He has committed fraud. He's committed, wars of aggression. That's the highest crime on the planet, right? He aided and abetted his son in committing all kinds of frauds, particularly in Ukraine, but in lots of other places. He pardoned his son. Joe Biden pardoned the kid. Speaking of prison, right? Joe Biden pardoned the kids for cash judge, who was a judge who took kickbacks, or he got payments, right, This is our thing. So cops, as you said, were established as a force, an armed force of white men whose job it was to round up escaped slaves. Right, that was how police were began in the United States, and that's how they have always been operated. Right, which is why for the benefit of racialized capitalism, then and now. But the courts are also the cops are slave catchers. The courts are slave auction houses, right? I think I don't know if I made this point on this stream last week, but I think I did on the Twitch stream. The courts are just as complicit with the crimes of the United States as the police, because and just this is one egregious example, right? Which is that these kids for cash, the kids for cash judge, right? Michael Conahan of Pennsylvania was convicted in 2011 of what was infamously called kids for cash scandal, where he took payments, he took bribes, he took money, he was paid, right? Kickbacks from a for-profit detention center in exchange for wrongly sending juveniles to their facilities. The case was widely considered to be one of the worst judicial scandals in Pennsylvania history. So the judge Michael Conahan, so this is a judge who knowingly, right, wrongly sentenced like just huge numbers of children, child slavery. He sent huge numbers of children as a judge to a juvenile prison, and where they would also be doing what? Delivering or making Victoria's Secret garments, right? Where they would be doing what? Putting together Captain America Funko Pops, where they would be doing what? Whatever corporations and the capitalist class needed, right? And so that's just one judge. But the reality is that is a particularly bad, that is an extremely nasty example of how courts serve capital and serve racism, because disproportionately these were black and brown kids, right, going to prison. But every prisoner in the United States, right, all of those, Kamala Harris talks about, we got to keep all those nonviolent drug offenders and just random kids who might not have committed a crime, but the police needed to reach an arrest quota, and they just grabbed a black kid in front of a 7-Eleven, right? We need to keep those kids in prison because we have record-setting wildfires in California. We have a lot of agricultural work. We have a lot of industrial work. We have to bottle our Coca-Cola. The Resnicks need pistachio agricultural baggers and pistachio harvesters. Resnicks is multi-billion-dollar ZIONIST family that own all the huge swaths of the water of California. They own the water supplies of California, and they charge money for that water that they own, and they use it to grow overpriced pistachios, and they send their profits to GENLCIDE and ISRAEEL. And they need labor, right? So Kamala said we need to keep the kids in prison because we need the slave labor. We need that cheap labor. We need that $0 an hour labor. We need those chain gangs, because America needs chain gangs, right? That was Kamala Harris. That's how she came to become the vice president, is because she did, as a black woman. Of course, like, the U.S. don't care about people like that, but she was the best comprador, right? She did as much. She did the bidding of the system, and was a traitor to all of her people of various identities. And that's who the United States gives. That's who they promote high into their government, right? Which is owned by the worst people in the world. So, but the judges, right, in California, you have district courts, you have circuit courts. Every prison slave in California that we just talked about, right? All those buses full of orange jumpsuited black and brown young men, right, risking their lives to put out Kanye West's the fires around Kanye West or around George Lucas, right, in Marin County, or the putting out the fires like on the outskirts of LA, right, so that the Kardashians and Taylor Swift can keep partying, as the fires burn all of West Coast to ash. All of those prisoners, all those, a lot of unjustly incarcerated young black and brown prisoners, and some of them old, they were put there by a judge. So the judges are constantly, the number one thing that judges do is they don't do justice in the United States under a capitalist, unjust criminal. They are crime enablers, right? The 2.5 million prisoners in the United States is largely it was a crime to put them there, right? And it's openly stated, right? We don't care about justice. We need prison slaves. We don't care about justice. We need to chastise the less incarcerated wage slaves. We need to scare non-enslaved people that you could go to prison, right? If we'll get to him, if you take an action like Luigi, right? Or not Luigi. If you take an action like not Luigi, the person who actually did it, but it's almost certainly not Luigi Mangione, because the cops lie and they're terrible at solving crimes, like I already said, and there's so much evidence that points to, and like the original UHC shooter's eyebrow, it's like 3 times the distance between his eyebrows than Luigi's mugshot, before and after his makeover in prison. Also, he's wearing gloves, and the NYPD said they gathered from a water bottle, a food wrapper, and from a burner phone that was supposedly discarded in a trash can. The NYPD said they got fingerprints that matched Luigi's in the area, and it's like the shooter was wearing freaking gloves. It's like obvious, right? So NYPD hasn't watched NCIS or NYPD Blue. I mean, the thing is, NYPD doesn't solve crimes. U.S. cops don't solve crimes. All that NCIS, all the cop shows are propaganda made to make you believe that they solve crimes. So that's why they're so terrible at even just cooking up right? You can see Eric Adams and a bunch of cops and isn't real trainers, right? And the U.S. federal government, FBI is over there like, okay, everybody, let's come up with a story, right? What the NYPD does is write fiction. Right? Kind of like the U.S. government and U.S. history professors, right? What they do is they write fiction, right? Like U.S. history books, where America is some kind of great country, right? And deny the fact, right? So, but everyone writes fiction, right? What they do is they sit around, right? They go into ChatGPT, and they go, ChatGPT, give me an idea. Prompt ChatGPT. I need to take, somebody has shot a multimillionaire executive. The first time since like the 1930s with John Dillinger, we have a high-profile Robin Hood lower-class person that has done direct assault on the upper crust capitalist class. What do we do with ChatGPT? And the ChatGPT said, there was a food wrapper. Come up with an explanation for a random suspect we'll just grab. Okay, that camera footage, the camera footage of this footage could have been from anywhere. Could have been from Pennsylvania. The camera screen grabs, right, could have been from it could have been from an Applebee's. It could have been from McDonald's last year in, maybe in New York, maybe not, right? I mean, because I might remember, this is like isn't real style, right? Just make some crap up, right? Here's a calendar with some names on it, right? Even if you catch us, we don't care. We just keep lying, right? Because there's no justice, right? It's irrelevant. So what Eric Adams, the U.S. Biden, right? Billionaires, right? Isn't real trainers, and all the U.S. cops, right? All the boys in blue, they come sit down and they're like, okay, everybody, what's the story? I mean, it's in True Detective. It's like some scenes like that. It's like, okay, what are we gonna tell everybody that happened? This guy's face, his eyebrows, I mean, they did a really bad job, right? Like they should have chosen a guy with appropriate. They should not have chosen Luigi. They should have chosen someone that at least looks somewhat like the freaking supposed shooter, right? Okay, let's find somebody that's kind of white and has a nose and a forehead. Okay, Luigi, that guy kind of looks like it, I think. Okay, And it's kind of like, okay, who do we not like? Luigi has been kind of like on the shit list for some of his family, right? Because he's actually from a wealthy family, but he's like he wasn't around for a while. Uh, he's not on their good list. He's like a black sheep of a U.S. corporate dynasty, healthcare dynasty. He's actually richer than Brian. His family's richer than Brian Thompson, the unalived CEO, right? But it's kind of like, he wore a mask sometimes. Okay, there's a mask wearing kid. Some people don't like him, right? All the other healthcare executives, right? All the healthcare executives, healthcare billionaires, right? They're all sitting there like, okay, cops that we own, I really don't like this Luigi, our nephew Luigi. We really don't like him. Can you like make him the suspect? And the cops, right, who take money from the rich and are incompetent, effing losers. The cops are like, okay, yes, rich billionaires that pay our cop salaries with all of the money you own the U.S. government with. Jamie Dimon, right, CEO of Goldman Sachs, like straight up gave $4 million, like publicly gave $4 million into the New York Police Department retirement fund right as Occupy was getting going. He said, cops beat up all those poor kids trying to stop capitalism, right? And so the cops are going to go, okay, executives, we'll try to make up a story that incriminates this Luigi nephew that you don't really like. And okay, all right, everybody, let's go. Let's walk him around. That's how the U.S. does. That's not crime solving. That is criminal thuggery done by U.S. police and FBI, all of it. And that is criminal. That is crime doing, right? That is PR. That is bad PR management. Right? What this was supposed to intimidate people into not wanting to, unalive CEOs with bullets, right? That's what it's supposed to be. This is only pissing people off and making people love and like thirst for the Luigi guy. It's just the person Luigi. They have their Saint Luigi posters going around as we speak with like him drawn up like an Italian saint. Like the Pope Francis is gonna like have like a Luigi giant 300-foot Luigi mural, and that's gonna like get people young kids going back to Catholic Church. Is what they're gonna put Saint Luigi up in all of the cathedrals from New York to France to the Philippines, and they're gonna have Saint Luigi, and all the kids are gonna come flogging back. That's the plan, to get kids back to church on midnight mass for Christmas, right? They'll show up for Palestine, watching the Bethlehem Christian pastor's sermon and a homily, and then they'll come for Luigi. That's the two things that will get kids back to church. Saint Luigi. But anyways, okay. So, but this is supposed to be about slavery. So, but let's move. But my point is that the United States doesn't. Slavery is not a punishment for a crime in the United States. Slavery is whoever the United States feels like grabbing off the street, because the United States doesn't put criminals in prison, right? The United States puts poor and marginalized people in prison, or whoever the U.S. feels like putting in prison, right? Because that's who. This is not the person who. It's not even remotely probable that this is the person that did the shooting. If you just look at basic facts. As Luigi Mangione appropriately pointed out, it is an insult, right? As the cops were wrangling him and manhandling him away into a unknown building. I forget where it was. I think it was one of the U.S. government buildings. He shouted, right? This is an insult to the intelligence of the American people, and it is. I mean, like they're not even trying to make this look like it's. They're not even trying to make it somewhat believable, like it's Luigi is the guy that did it. It's a complete joke. It's a horrible joke. It's hurting a lot of people. He is threatening with the death penalty. They're saying it's a federal crime. They're giving him a terrorist charge, right? The reason why they give him that charge is because they're trained by Israel, right? And all they do is call somebody that they're committing war crimes against. They call them all terrorist, and then you can do whatever you want, right? It's what the U.S. does, right? The U.S. and Israel are Siamese twins. So, And so, but that's not solving a crime. That's putting a random person in jail. That's putting a random person in jail. And so that means that slavery hasn't changed at all. It's just the United States has slightly different wallpaper after the 13th Amendment. That's all it means. Okay, okay, let's go back to that. So that comes to that. But yeah, so kids for cash, and so several points. One of them is that police cash the enslaved. Judges are slave auction houses. They get paid salaries to put unjustly, again, random people into slave plantations called prisons, right? That corporations and the rich use to do cheap labor for them. Cheaper labor than $7 an hour minimum wage, right? Or whatever wages you would pay to somebody to put out fire. Firefighters got paid, $30, $50, $60 an hour. Black and brown slave labor firefighters is $60 per hour cheaper. It saves California. It saves the United States pro-slavery racist state of California. It saves California millions of dollars a year, up to billions a year, with all those prison slaves. Because otherwise they have to pay $60 an hour to those firefighters who would be doing it otherwise. The firefighters are not happy about this. Obviously, the non-incarcerated firefighters are not happy about that whole thing, because that means they are always in jeopardy of losing their jobs, getting pay cuts. And California, like Gavin Newsom will say, non-incarcerated free firefighters making 30 or 40 an hour, you should accept the pay cut at 25, because we could always replace you. We can always replace you, normal firefighters, with black and brown slave firefighters, and they get paid like $1. So you should be happy with you should be happy with your 30, because we could always get rid of you, and we'll just arrest and throw more people in prison for made up jaywalking or made up nonviolent marijuana crime, right? So you see that, so the more the United States uses slavery, prison slave labor, plantation slave labor, right? The more the U.S. does this, Uncle Tom, the more the U.S. is like a slave plantation. It obviously it hurts the people that they're keeping in the prisons to do the forced unpaid labor, but then it hurts also the workers outside the prison, because they can always threaten them, right? Now the McDonald's workers, right? If Starbucks and McDonald's and Burger King use leased out slave labor, then that can threaten all of the current non-incarcerated Starbucks baristas, all the McDonald's clerks, right? McDonald's can say, well, you better not strike. You better accept your $10 an hour or $13 an hour. Because if you don't accept the $13 an hour, we're going to bring prison slaves, and they get paid nothing an hour. So we're going to bring in, $1 an hour, 25 cents an hour, people in chains to do your Starbucks job. If you don't stop asking for higher wages. So you see how that works? So this is why the United States really wants to have and keep its slavery going. It has to keep its post 13th Amendment slavery going. It wants to expand it as far as possible. That's what the cop cities are for. 69 cop cities, training hyper militarized police, and all the U.S. judges that are corrupt have to keep the U.S. judges. They're like they're like squirrels, just gathering up all the black and brown kids and throwing them into prison for money, right? The kids for cash is just the biggest, most egregious one, right? But like all judges, that's part of their job, is to make sure that the prisons are flooded with cheap slave labor, because that is what capital wants, and capital owns all branches of the U.S. government, all three. Clarence Thomas is just one of the most egregious, working for this billionaire, extreme far right, swastika mansion filled, a black Supreme Court Justice, Clarence Thomas, working for a swastika mansion filled billionaire guy. That's just, but all the judges are corrupt, every single one of them. They all participate in all the wars of invasion, all these wars of aggression, crimes in Guantanamo. I mean, all the prison slavery that we see, all these unjustly incarcerated people. Supreme Court oversees all of that, right? They watch it all happen and they just like do this, or so And the United States needs to keep that going. In fact, it wants to increase that because people are getting increasingly upset. So it wants to expand it. That's why it's building prisons, increasing police budgets, right? And obviously health, housing, education, industry, economy, infrastructure. No, the U.S. spends, it doesn't care. Right, expanding the military, obviously. The U.S. is the planetary world police to enslave countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and other African countries. Now, those three are the ones that are really resisting right now. We'll get to that later. But the U.S. military is the world slave catcher. It makes sure that all of the oil of Syria, right, is coming to America. U.S. has its bases right in the oil fields in Syria, right? It makes sure all of the Congo and Sudan and all that entire region, right, all the world's U.S. military and all of its vassals ensure all of the resources of these countries, the coltan, the copper, in all these African countries, Asian, Latin American countries, are being extracted, and the people there are enslaved. Literal, there are slaves in Libya, and there are child slaves in Congo, Sudan, getting the rare earths for your iPhone, right? So the U.S. military and the U.S. police inside, the domestic and foreign U.S. police forces are all slave catchers. So the global U.S. slavery is so huge, right? It's billions of people under the U.S. capitalist slavery system. But so we have we'll come to the larger reality in a bit. So I think I made that point that it doesn't really matter whether you have committed a crime or not. That's not what determines it. It's just if the U.S. needs slaves, it will get more slaves. Period. The police catch them. The judges auction them, and they get paid money by the capitalists that own all of the corporations and the profit from all the business that's done that uses slave labor. Let me come back to the article. Yeah. So cheap, reliable labor has generated more than $250 million for the state of Alabama since 2000 through money garnished from prisoners' paychecks. Most jobs are inside facilities where the state's inmates, who are disproportionately black, this is in Alabama, can be sentenced to hard labor and forced to work for free, doing everything from mopping floors to laundry. More than 10,000 inmates have logged a combined 17 million work hours outside Alabama's prison walls since 2018 for entities like city and county governments and businesses that range from major car part manufacturers and meat processing plants to distribution centers for major retailers like Walmart. Total work done by prisoners. Aggregated work release logs obtained by Alabama Department of Corrections show that Dorsey Trailers, 260,000 labor hours, 240 employees. Cast Products, 451. Progressive Finishes, I guess it's like a detailing or something related to vehicles. Van drivers, 200,000 hours of labor. Shelby County Environmental, Kith's Kitchen, Haleyville, Masonite, Kith Furniture. Well, those working at private companies can at least earn a little money. They face possible punishment if they refuse, from being denied family visits to being sent to higher security prisons, which are so dangerous that federal government filed a lawsuit 4 years ago that remains pending, calling the treatment of prisoners unconstitutional. I mean, that's great. The United States is unconstitutional, just in general, as I've already pointed out. So I feel like that's like for PR more than anything else, to make it seem like the U.S. cares about anyone other than billionaires that own it. Though they make at least $7.25 an hour, the state siphons 40% off the top of all wages, and also levies fees, including $5 a day for rides to their jobs, $15 a month for laundry. So it's just like, at the end of the day, it's basically as much as they can get away with stealing everything from the prisoners. Turning down work can jeopardize chances of early release in the state that last year granted parole to only 8% of eligible prisoners. an all-time low among the worst rates nationwide, although that number more than doubled this year after public outcry. It is a symptom of a completely, utterly broken system. No, it's a completely, utterly functioning system, right? The system is working as designed to extract maximum revenue from as many people as possible, paying them as little as possible. That's the purpose of a capitalist system. Slavery is simply the optimum form of capitalism, right? Non-slavery capitalism, right? Regular workers working at a corporation, right, in office or a factory, they can be paid. It's like 85 to 90% profit, right? While they pay the worker $10 or $30 an hour. Unionized capitalism is less because they might get paid $20 to $60 an hour, depending on the industry. So unionized capitalism is, 65 to 80% revenue. 65 to 80% of your labor value is given to the corporation. If you have an illegal immigrant, right, they can work for $1 to $3 an hour, right? So that's like 90, 96, 97, 98% profitability, right? If you have a Central South American immigrant, Mexican immigrant, Filipino that doesn't have papers, and you could call the Immigration and Custom Enforcement, right, because they don't have a green card, you can pay that person way less than minimum wage. So that's 90. So illegal immigrant labor is, I'm not saying illegal people are bad. It's just like that's the U.S. abuses global South people that are struggling and refugees. But if you don't have your paperwork, abused undocumented labor is 96, 97, 98% profit. Capitalist exploitation. Slave labor can be 99 or 100, like chattel slavery, right? Like 1830s Louisiana or South Carolina chattel slavery on a cotton plantation. All you got to do is throw the slaves some slop. You throw them some rotten cabbage and the oxtail, and they make actually good oxtail soup from it sometimes. But you don't pay them anything. You just give them the part of the cow you don't eat, and you give them like the vegetable you don't care about, or just rotten whatever you want, or you don't feed them if you don't want to, right? So slave labor is like 99.5% full chattel slavery, like black chattel slavery of African people in the United States. That was like 99.5% capitalist profit. Prison slavery, I don't know exactly, but it's like 96, 97%. It's super high. Almost all of its profit, as much as possible, right? So there's nothing broken about that. That's the way the United States and its capitalist, racist, colonialist system was designed, internally and externally, right? The U.S. wars is just a continuation of British, French, etc. Euro-colonialism after World War II. It's called neo-colonialism, imperialism. It's the same system. And the imperial system, the global colonial system of U.S. wars and stealing everyone's resources, is also functioning as designed, as the U.S. internal system is functioning as designed. It's not broken at all. And that's why many people are prison abolitionists, obviously. Many prisoners work 40 hours a week outside their factories and then get weekend passes, allowing them to go home without any supervision or electronic monitoring. So when prisoners are then told they're too dangerous to be permanently released, it looks like another way to create a cheap labor force that is easily exploited. And these are just like evolving constantly. The West, the best minds in the West and the U.S., all their job is to sit around, like I said, right? They type in a ChatGPT, right? They used to use their brains. Now they use generative AI, planet destroying, climate change causing, stochastic parrot / plagiarism software called ChatGPT, right? But before, they would use their brain, right, with their MBA, with their Harvard, big money that the big money that mommy and daddy paid to Harvard to give a great education. What they do is they sit around and they go, how can we squeeze more money out of poor people, especially black and brown ones, right? And then they come up with new ways to do that. That's all. That's what executives do. That's what CEOs do. That's what the U.S. government does. That's what That's what all the rich do. That's what they spend. That's what you get paid the big bucks to do, is to basically be horrible under a capitalist racist system. And now what they do is they ask ChatGPT what to do, which is why they're getting worse at it. ChatGPT is also owned by giant super rich people and Palantir and friends of the AI automated military industrial complex. Arthur Tommy, who has worked at various private companies over the past 6 years, said he was denied parole in 2022 after losing his job at KFC, where he had complained about low wages. A full-time cook, he was upset that even teenagers working the register were out-earning him, despite the fact that he had worked there for over a year. Out of 10 current and former prisoners who filed a class action federal lawsuit last year against state officials, local governments and businesses like McDonald's and Wendy's franchises contend they perpetuate a system of forced labor akin to a modern-day form of slavery. I mean, it is a modern-day form of slavery. It's literally just slavery, but with slightly different rules. That keeps the best workers from being released. He currently works at Progressive Finish, is one of the, and they try their best to keep the workers that work hard. You know, it's like in the slave auction days, they would put a black man on the raised platform of wood, right, half naked, and if he was 6'3" and he's like 250 pounds of muscle, the white slave owner, right, the cotton plantation owner, peanuts, or whatever, tobacco, whatever they were happen to be doing, they would bid, I will give $30 for that larger slave. He could do more work. The smaller one, that's he's like 150 pounds and is not very large, he won't be able to get as much work done, so I'm gonna give $20 for that one, right? And so what they do now is they say, okay, if this is a very good worker, right? This is a very good worker. So what we're gonna do, the slave auctioneers, this is the U.S. government and the court, they're gonna say, okay, so they'll say, okay, what we're gonna do is this is a very good McDonald's worker, slave worker at McDonald's and Wendy's, right? So we're gonna make sure that his status in the prison, we'll make up a reason. We'll extend it by saying he's too dangerous, so we want to keep this one around, right? So this is how McDonald's and Wendy's, right, and they are the slave buyers, right? And the corrections facility itself, they're like, we really want to keep this. This is a good, hard-working slave. He's really good at moving those McChickens. He can really take those Wendy's cheeseburgers and he can really flip them fast. He doesn't slack. And right. And so we're gonna instead of like the slave owner, the plantation owner paying $30 for the slave he wants, right? They just go, okay, well, you're a very dangerous person, or you're here's some arbitrary clause we will add to the state of Alabama or the United States, state of California. The thing is, it's not just Alabama; it's every state of the United States uses slave labor, right? California and New York arrest. The part that's not even talked about is that California and New York arrest, and vastly disproportionately, the blue areas of the United States, Democrat-run cities, this archipelago of blue in seas of red rural, more spread out suburban areas. Most of the U.S. population is in the cities, right? And most of the black and brown non-white populations in the cities. So what the U.S. does is the U.S. has 90% of the black and brown populations in these cities with Democrat run, often with a black mayor, a black governor, like Eric Adams. NYPD arrests how many thousands of black and brown people for prison slave labor? They throw them into Rikers. They made all the hand sanitizer for 3 cents an hour. They made $50 an hour, like Cuomo branded luxury hand sanitizer. They were selling for $50 a bottle, paying the inmates in the New York prisons like less than $1 per hour to make it, right? But the reality is, it's not just a red state thing. This is the red blue dystopia, racist capitalist U.S. has the 90% of the prisoners are arrested by Democrat, often black mayor, black police chief run, comprador, sellout, indoor slaves like Eric Adams, in-house slaves, Kamala Harris, right? To make it seem like the U.S. isn't racist and California isn't and New York aren't racist. So they will mass incarcerate 90% of all the slaves in the U.S., right, which are all coming out of those blue cities. They send them into Alabama. They send them into Arizona. In Hawaii is an illegal U.S. occupation colony. In Hawaii, they send Hawaiians, actually Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders are the most over incarcerated of any ethnic, any racialized group, we are 4 times more likely to go to prison unjustly. So it's actually even higher per capita than the black population. In the total terms, it's more black population, but it's a long story. But Hawaiians, right, when we get illegally arrested because the U.S. has no jurisdiction in Hawaii, they target Native Hawaiians like myself. We get sent to Arizona, right? Thousands of miles from us. It's part of eliminating indigenous people like myself in our lifeways, separating Hawaiian children from the parents. Hawaii has the highest rate, one of the highest rates of school to prison pipeline. It's like in the top 5 states of the United States. And so Hawaii is a blue state, fake state, that sends huge quantities of per capita, huge quantities of this racialized slave labor into a state in the middle of the United States, and Arizona, I forget, but it's not California. It's not a deep blue coastal state, right? But it's a blue state, fake state. Hawaii's not a real state. It's an illegally occupied country, colonially occupied country, like Palestine. But Hawaii, blue democratic. Hawaii is actually the most democratic per capita per dollar goes to the Democratic Party. Hawaii is more Democrat like than not more U.S. Party Democratic than California or New York, and it sends the highest per capita amount of racialized slave labor into a red state. So I just want to point that out. So this is not like this is just that state or just that. It's an all party. It's a bipartisan phenomenon. But yeah, so that's how the slavery has not changed one iota. U.S. slavery has not changed one single iota since the founding of the United States. This is the same system. It's just like mutated, ultimately. Okay, that is that here. One other thing I want to point out also, yeah. So Biden, not only that, Biden also, I mean, Biden should be one of the prisoners in prison right now, right? If anything, right? The fact that this guy is free is just nonsensical. Did you know that, like, just one example, somebody was incarcerated, somebody was executed in China for official for overseeing $400 million of bribes. Sorry, 200 million. Biden has accepted $400+ million of bribes over the years from various special interests, corporations, and the rich. And so, I'm just saying, and he also forgave. So on top of the kids for cash judge who took money to incarcerate countless young kids, Biden also commuted the sentence of his son. That's this total corruption. Biden should that is just like in the so-called free democratic just country of the United States, a president pardoning his own son just because he felt like that's no different from what he accused Donald Trump when Donald Trump gave Ivanka sweetheart deals over various companies, or Trump also pardoned one of his relatives, everything, right? And they accused the Democrats have called that the most horrible, heinous corruption of and it's the most disgrace to the United States. But Biden is doing exactly the same thing, right? Biden is doing exactly the same thing, pardoning his own son, who is complicit, and his own son who is convicted, right, of all this like flagrant drug abuse, right? And he and Kamala, right? Crime Bill Biden and Kamala, they have celebrated locking up millions. Like Biden alone is estimated to have increased 4 times the U.S. prison population, and then he commutes his own sentence for his own son. So again, there's nothing to do with committing crimes. The United States justice system has nothing to do with punishing criminals. It has to do with rounding up slaves and trying to make examples of people who, like political prisoners, like Mumia, prisoners like Leonard Peltier and other Black indigenous people of color, prisoners like what they try to do with Assange, Daniel Hale, right? People who try to stop war crimes, people like what they try to do to Luigi. People who aren't even actually the one that's probably did the unaliving of the CEO. But what they did was they did violence back to the rich that have been doing mountains of violence through murderous healthcare, through mass incarceration of innocent people for slavery, through denying people basic needs, food, housing, medical, etc., to force them into a position of working for these horrible corporations, right? And so the U.S. prisons, U.S. police, and U.S. so-called justice system and the courts, that is what they exist to do, right? And Biden is just a living epitome of like just like, right? It is like a mocking. It's like, I will let my son go. I'm gonna get my son out of jail for something I put millions of people in jail for. Me and Kamala. Kamala was a top cop. Biden was a top prison expander with his crime bill. Hillary Clinton talked about super predators in that time as well. So, yeah. Yeah, what's up, Grant? Okay, anyways, let's move on because I gotta finish up to 117. I started a bit late. Let's get this thing done. Okay, what was that thing I wanted to jump to? Okay, I did not talk. So coming back to modern U.S. slavery and the chainbreakers, Alabama prophets. We talked about the Alabama profiting off the prisoners, like all United States. Just to give you an example, just to be bipartisan about this, right? The next generation of firefighters learn how to fight fires while in prison. California inmate fight fires. California has long relied on inmates to fight wildfires. That's all you need to know. California inmate firefighter crews dwindling as the state starts. So what they're saying is, right, we need more slaves. We need more firefighter slaves to put out all of our fires. Inmate firefighters still denied visitors at camps in California. It's great. They give them all orange firefighting uniforms, right? Because they're prison slaves. But they're also putting out fires, so it's kind of like the orange makes sense. It is a dual use orange clothing, orange hat, orange, orange. What do they call that? The fire suppressant, fire resistant suit, right? It's dual use because it's what firefighters wear, but it's also what prisoners wear. It's funny because like sometimes they celebrate. Like look at all these great, you know. Look at this amazing firefighting team we have, right? Putting out our fires. This is all images of California slave firefighters. Right? And now they're saying, "Oh no, if we have less prisoners, how are we supposed to fight our fires?" I mean, there's an obvious solution. There's a really obvious solution. The United States could stop being a horrendous slave plantation, right? California could stop being a Democrat slave system, right? Stop having chain gangs, okay? Stop being a horrible human rights abuser. And pay non-slave firefighters decent wages so that they can do the important service of putting out fires. That's what the California could do. But instead, what they're going to do is build 10 more prisons, increase prison sentences. Kamala Harris probably go back to locking people up, right? She'll be a top cop again. Kamala Harris will be like, you know, she'll be marching down the street, right? Like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like telling really bad jokes and cackling at them in Los Angeles, right? Finding black families, taking the dad and the 16-year-old son out of the family's hands and throwing the dad and the son into prison so that California can put out fire for $0 an hour. So that all the rich that don't want to pay taxes can keep having slave labor. That's what the California is going to do, because that's the kind of place that the U.S. is. I'm not saying that's good, but that's what the U.S. is. It shouldn't do that, but I mean that is what the U.S. is going to do. Unimpeded. This is what the United States and California will do. And so, anyways, okay, I did not talk about external though. Okay, so now externally, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. So yeah, one thing obviously, and happy 75th to Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara was a very important anti-slavery, anti-global slavery in the prison house of nations that is the U.S. empire. Thomas Sankara was a very important resistance figure who led revolutionary action in the Sahel region, West Africa, or a lot of times called Francophone Africa, where many French colonies historically and to this day, in fact, although less as these places are becoming free. So happy 75th birthday to Thomas Sankara. Important thing to note. I think I might have bookmarked that. Let me just double check this here. Sorry, trying to find my. I know I got a lot. I probably shouldn't have looked in there because I got so many links. Oh, here's one. Okay. So actually, let me just do a little bit of the history of the Sankara, because that will give some pretext to the context to what I'm about to talk about for a little bit. There is a little thread here that I wanted to kind of take a look at. Happy birthday to socialist revolutionary Thomas Sankara. Read on to find out what he accomplished and how a coup with suspected U.S. and French connections devastated the country that he shaped. Burkina Faso's alleged revolutionary leader was born today in 1949. Here is his impact and the coup that changed it all. Also, happy winter solstice, by the way. Shortest day of the year. It's actually not very. It's not very rainy. It's usually very rainy, but it's actually not very rainy right now. In Hawaii, it actually gets super rainy. Anyways, tangents aside, Thomas Sankara was born 75 years ago today. At 33, Sankara rose to the presidency of Burkina Faso with a daring coup. Burkina Faso is a country in, for those who don't know that, it's a country in West Africa. With a daring coup, his leadership was cut short after only 4 years, with an assassination believed to have been backed by the U.S. and France. Despite this abrupt end, Sankara's time in office brought radical change. Sankara launched a nationwide literacy campaign, driving the literacy rate from 13% in 1983 to 73% by 1987. He also redistributed land from feudal landlords, giving it to the peasants. His revolution extended into public health, where 2.5 million children were vaccinated against meningitis, yellow fever, and measles. Sankara slashed his salary to $450 a month and limited his possessions to a car, 4 bikes, guitars, a fridge, and a freezer. Oh, he played electric. I also play electric guitar. You know, like Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was famous for like black U.S. Rock musician, famous for pioneering many previously unknown guitar techniques, including like the wah pedal, I believe was his. He played an amazing rendition of the Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock that simulated U.S. bombings and war in Vietnam. I watched that actually many times. I performed the Jimi Hendrix version of the Star Spangled Banner at my private Catholic high school that I went to, terrorizing. I should say not terrorizing. Oh no, my video is gonna get deranked. Shocking and awing all of the people at the school. But I didn't fully understand the meaning of that. But I just think that's interesting that he was he liked playing his guitar. He had a car, 4 bikes, guitars, a fridge, and a freezer. Thomas Sankara also sold off the government's fleet of Mercedes cars, replacing them with cheapest cars available in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso, a country long devastated by colonial and forced underdevelopment, lacked basic infrastructure. Under Sankara's leadership, new roads and railways were constructed to connect the nation. He also converted the army's provisioning store into the country's first supermarket. Sankara was a staunch advocate for women's rights, appointing women to senior positions and ensuring they had access to pregnancy leave while continuing their education. His belief in gender equality is summed up in the famous quote, "There is no true social revolution without the liberation of women." Also important, this also happened in Libya under Gaddafi. The women's rights were top of the list. Also, a lot of the economic improvements, the free quality education, free quality education, healthcare, etc. Every newlywed young couple got a free apartment building or house as well. And also women's rights is very important. And this is what happens across the board. Cuba, Soviet Union, women's rights, look at the Soviet era posters. Women will hold up half the sky, as in Mao, in that time. Anyway, that's important as well. Sankara rejected foreign aid, famously saying, "He who feeds you controls you." He called on African nations to unite in repudiating foreign debt, arguing that the impoverished should not be forced to pay the wealthy. It's called communism. It's called getting rid of the capitalist system, but on an international country-sized scale. It's interesting. It looks like a lei. I'm not sure what exactly he is wearing, but it resembles the leis that we have in Hawaii. Sankara was also one of the people that inspired and was instructive to Haunani-Ke Trask, which is one of our Hawaiian anti-colonial capitalist system Hawaiian leaders in Hawaii. And many people have heard her "We are not American, we are not American" speech, right? But a lot of African revolutionaries were who she has said she looked towards to dealing with the colonialism in Hawaii and imperialism, U.S. imperialism in Hawaii. Because she was at college and she was becoming a professor while people like Sankara were, and obviously the Cuban Revolution were happening, right, in real time. Sankara's humble lifestyle and dedication to his principles earned him deep admiration from his people. He became known for his socialist programs, fearless opposition to the national elite, and bold challenges to Western imperialism and neo-colonialism. Of course, that is Sankara with Fidel Castro in Cuba, who led a socialist path there and kicked out the U.S. colonial capitalists and many slave owners, including Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz's family members. Wealthy, rich, horrible slave owners who now become American leaders, right? This is really, when you look at American leadership, American government, right? They are just some of the worst wealthy, pro-colonialist, pro-slavery people, right? They had slaves, servants, slaves, indentured servants, serfs of some kind under a feudal system. Either way, they were the rich and powerful who kept their power through various mechanisms, right? The racism, sexism, just brutal repression, chattel slavery, enforced slavery of various kinds, austerity, just duplicitous buying of governments, secret police, not secret police, U.S. back coup, whatever they needed, right? And the United States, Jair Bolsonaro is one of these horrible people. They all come to the United States when their country has an anti-capitalist, anti-colonial, or any kind of revolution or a huge swing that pushes these people out, like in Cuba, like in Venezuela. Jair Bolsonaro was kicked out of Brazil. They come to U.S. Like Bolsonaro was eating KFC, probably slave-delivered KFC, right, in a Floridian town, like right after he left, because he wanted to get the U.S. to help him get to resubjugate, right? Bolsonaro, right, came to the United States to get the world police, the U.S. CIA, U.S. military, U.S. government, U.S. federal government, the mechanism of planetary capitalist imperialist power. He came to the world police to re-enslave his country, Brazil. Bolsonaro came to the world police to re-enslave, to slave catch the whole country of Brazil. That's another way to think about that, right? And as the same way as U.S. police inside the U.S. government enslaves people in it to serve the KFC and do 25 cents an hour mechanical separation of the Tyson chicken nuggets. But then external entire countries, U.S. comes to colonize. Right? Colonization is just slave catching of entire continents. Today, Samba Sankara remains an enduring symbol of radical, and that's why they're trying to catch Cuba still, strangle Cuba to death. That's what the U.S. did to Syria: sanction and steal oil and agriculture till Syria crumbled. It's what the U.S. has done to Syria. It's what the U.S. has done. Without those sanctions and the U.S. stealing the resources, gutting the country of revenue and economy, so people are paying like their entire wage or more for a loaf of bread. And the generals in the Syrian military just recently were being paid $40 a month. $40 a month. The generals. I mean, how can you exist under that? It's the United States caused that collapse because U.S. wanted, they wanted what they wanted, and they stole. It was them stealing and crushing the economy, and that's what they've been doing in Cuba ever since. That's what they're trying to do to any African country that resists. That's what they're doing to any country in North Korea, any country in the world that resists the U.S. imperial capitalist system. Any escaped slave from the planetary plantation that is U.S. imperialism must be caught, must be whipped with sanctions. The cutting off of access to energy, food, resources, especially through the monetary system, embargoes. Cuba's been embargoed to $135 billion worth of prevented energy, food, and other resources over the last decades, right? So Cuba is not a socialist nightmare because socialism or communism is bad and it doesn't work. It's because the United States has been a boot standing on its neck, like it's been standing on Venezuela's neck, Syria's neck. Trying to stand on Iran's neck, not doing it very good. Trying to stand on China's neck, but China's bigger than the United States. That's the difference. Today, Samba Sankara remains an enduring, and then they try to stand on China's neck, and then China like kicks the U.S. in the face and says, "No more antimony for your Lockheed Martin weapons," and the U.S. is like, but they don't know what to do except bully and be horrible in the West. So. Today's Samba Sankara remains an enduring symbol of radical change, continuing to inspire Burkina Faso's evolving political landscape. So this red is made by Europeans, so it tends to cut off in the past. But let's come to the present. Okay, so that was the history, right? Of the that's some history, not all the history. That's just some history of resistance there. Chadians have spoken, no ifs, no buts, no extension. France must entirely leave by the 31st of January 2025. Chad is a new country. This has just happened. N'Djamena has officially requested the departure of French forces stationed in Chad before January 31st, marking a turning point in relations between the two countries. In Paris, authorities confirmed that negotiations are underway to respond to this request, while stressing the blah, 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 blah. Who gives a crap about that? The U.S. and France use U.S.-funded ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Mujahideen, right? They fund these Wahhabis, Salafists, the people that are currently the he, him pronoun fake woke Jolani in Syria, where this head chopping literal Al-Qaeda that the U.S. was hunting under George W. Bush, supposedly. The U.S. also created it, right? But they create these far-right extremists by funding and giving them weapons and cover. And then these extremists move around, right? They're not always controlled. They're like mercenaries. They just take money. These are just like horrible, far right, extreme versions of Western construction versions of Islam, and they have other versions all over Europe. They have all around the world. They have these kind of people, but they'll move into a country like Chad, like Burkina Faso. And then they'll cause problems. They'll start attacking people. They're also in Xinjiang. These are U.S.-funded and backed extremists that the ETIM. They were listed by the United States, right? Like Jolani, right? Until the U.S. decides, Al Qaeda is good now. You can chop as many heads and kill innocent people and women for not holding your extreme far right views, and that's okay. They just removed the $10 million bounty on the HTS Jolani leader's head. Right? They decided he's not a terrorist anymore. But they did the same thing to the East Turkestan Islamic movement in Xinjiang. They were far right extremist U.S.-backed head choppers, and they drove over people. They blew up public squares, killing innocent people for their extreme far right views. And then the U.S. said, "Oh, you're the good. You're the good ones now. You don't count as a terrorist." So African countries know this is part of the strategy, and the U.S. and France will say, "We need to go in your country to help stop all of these, terrorists." But then Africans are like, "But you created them, right? You created this Frankenstein monster, and you say you're going to stop it." The thing is, and they're not going to stop it. All the U.S. and France want to do is come back in the country and re-enslave the country, build military bases, steal the resources, beat up and crush all the local population, and keep them suffering and underdeveloped. In the global slave plantation, right? Africa is just a giant slave plantation for U.S. and Europe to steal everything and keep cheap labor and literal slave markets and child slavery, like in Sudan, Congo. So Africa is saying, no, we will not be slaves. And they're not just saying no, they have military force. They have military force, they have economic, and they have self-reliance and resilience that they're building. Like you must be able to feed yourself. If a colonizer is giving you grants, if a horrible imperial government, corporation, business, whatever is giving you grants, if they're giving you food, if they're giving you aid, if you rely on that, they control you. They can take it away, and they can say, now, if you don't do what we say, right? Stop trying to become sovereign. Stop trying to become independent. Stop using your resources for yourself, or we'll take your food aid away. We'll take your, right? You need food, energy, sovereignty of all kinds. This is, and also military sovereignty. If you can't defend your land, colonialists will come and steal and re-enslave you. And that's why Cuba has a military. That's why Chad has a military. That's why Burkina Faso, let's come to Burkina Faso. That's why Burkina Faso has a military. That's why Niger has Burkina Faso, led by Ibrahim Traore, fifth president, the world's youngest sitting leader. Is also part of the Alliance of the Sahel States, together with Mali and Niger. They are having huge breakthroughs. Burkina Faso has now kicked out U.S. and French forces with the support of some very large counter-imperialist forces as well. But they have their own military. They are using their own gold. They have large gold reserves. They are making their own gold bars. They have created 13 tons of gold that is their own reserves for the first time in I don't know, decades or history. I can't remember, but it's like they have their own gold reserves. It is not being stolen by a European or an American or foreign power. That is an amazing breakthrough. They are industrializing amazingly quickly. Some of this is actually with Chinese support and deals. They're actually getting tech transfer. They have like new forms of rice. There's just a brand new tomato plant. The first industrial tomato puree sauce like packaging and industrial canning operation. It's like they're really rapidly industrializing after kicking out the imperialist capitalist system, bringing about their own socialism with Sahel characteristics. I don't know exactly what the system is. It's not really important exactly what the system is at the moment. What matters is like that they are meeting their material conditions of the people. They're taking the control away from global billionaire-owned imperialist entities like the U.S. and France, and they're using the resources for themselves. I think the Traore also like is not, he didn't take a vow of poverty per se, but he's like not having any lavish expenditures of any kind. He cut all the salaries. He cut his own salary down to like just like an average 35,000 wage. He cut all the government, all the big, fat check paid bureaucrat salaries down to, I forget exactly. I remember he dropped all these exorbitant salaries for the government and took a very modest one himself as a show of solidarity with the population, which is different from the U.S. French colonial capitalist puppets like in Nigeria. And like in a lot of these other African countries, I still have puppets. Like Egypt's leadership, Jordan's leadership. I mean, Jordan's not necessarily in Africa. Egypt is though. And so this is the real liberation from slavery. It doesn't, this is we free us on an international scale. Okay, that's let me see. I'm just gonna grab a few more updates if I can find them on that. Actually, let me go to that. There's several accounts. One account to follow is the Sahel Revolutionary Soldier is one. Africa Stream is another one. Tony Blinken, the United States Empire. The United States Empire's Palpatine, Anthony Blinken, Neocon Ghoul, he has called Africa Stream a Russian propaganda site. It has nothing to do with Russia. It is where is it? It is Africans trying to speak their own mind and have their own ability to share their own African history. I'm sorry. But Tony Blinken called this, the United States called this a Russian propaganda site, and they tried to ban it from all Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all the platforms. All that goes to show you that the United States is an imperialist, capitalist, and extremely racist, unfree place that doesn't care about black voices. Definitely don't care about non-sellout black voices, that's for sure. It definitely hates international black voices, and there's no such thing as freedom of speech in the U.S. It's a joke. This is when the U.S. attacked them, so I just want to point that out. So if the highest, if the greatest evil in the world is attacking you, that's it's a good. You should probably at least check out what they're saying. As some of the Russian communist commanders once said, if you aren't taking flak, you're not over the target. If the United States military, federal government, U.S. police, FBI, CIA, if they're not attacking you, you're not doing anything, right? That's how you can tell. I mean that you should really, everyone should investigate. If you claim to be actually fighting colonialism and capitalism and decolonization, and the U.S. is letting you keep your job, and if your life is very comfortable, and you're not taking flack institutionally in terms of your job, you're getting tarred and feathered, the police, then you're not doing anything, right? You should be pursued. It's a badge of honor. The United States has, and its YouTube has, they deleted my videos. I made a video about Gaddafi, and the U.S. deleted it. The U.S. federal government. I mean, the U.S. empire, YouTube, the corporate state of the United States is all one and the same. It's all run by the same kind of ghouls. The corporations run the government. The government works for the corporations and the rich. But YouTube deleted my video on Gaddafi, and I was like, well, that's great. That means that I'm taking flack, right? Because I made a video about how if Muammar Gaddafi was a banker, the United States has given in the global 08-09 financial heist, the U.S. banking system. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, Jamie Dimon, these huge banks, Bank of America, they stole $16 trillion in like just the span of a few years, or maybe 5 years, in bailouts and in all of this mass shadow financial fraud and crime, and 0 high-level bankers went to prison. So if Gaddafi just became a New York City banker and put on a tie, and had champagne on, Greco-Roman marble fluted balconies next to the Trump Tower in Wall Street, on literal Wall Street, he would have been fine, right? But Muammar Gaddafi's problem was he wasn't an American, he wasn't a capitalist elite, and so he was dragged in a blood-soaked hefty bag from his home. Because that's what the U.S. does. Just like in the U.S., they drag some random guy Luigi, right, for doing anything good in the world, right? Not even the right guy, just not even the guy that did it, but they just grab anyway. And they took out Muammar Gaddafi because he was trying to build socialism and reuse the African resources for Africa through the African Monetary Fund. that he was trying to establish. So they wouldn't have to take IMF, World Bank, actual debt trap Western colonizer US and European loans. And so the United States killed him and destroyed the country, bound it into the Stone Age, and there were slave markets in Libya. And Libya has been a mess of US and Western-backed far-right extremists fighting over the territory, just like the US is trying to establish in Syria. So, so when you take flack, when Tony Blake, when a U.S. official comes out and starts saying, "Oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever," that's how you know you're doing something useful. So Africa Stream, good shout out to Africa Stream. Toxic U.S. pastoring Nigeria to go GMO. Another day, another revelation about how the U.S. will not let African nations determine their own policies. Okay, anyways, so let's come back to this though. There's a few other ones that were I think are interesting. I want to talk a little bit about like some of the other developments if I can find them. Macron is now roaming Africa looking for who to exploit. France's President Emmanuel Macron and Djibouti beg President not to follow the path of those who want to humiliate France. This is part France is falling apart in part because France is not able to steal Niger's uranium that used to light 1/3 of France's Eiffel Tower, Paris, all the shopping centers. France is not able to steal large quantities of Africa, right? Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, these all were supplying huge amounts of resources and revenue to France. America, you need to be on what America should figure out quickly how to redistribute its wealth and deal with this capitalist, illegitimate slave plantation, because it's only going to get worse for the masses of people as America loses its colonies, just as it's getting worse for France as France loses its colonies. And the solution is not to, this is part of why some Americans would be liberal and conservatives would be like looking the other way when Isn't Real does GENLCIDE, because they subconsciously know that they want to sacrifice Africa, Asian, Latin America, and poor people and people in the Arab world so they can have slightly more Big Macs and slightly cheaper groceries. Because, I mean, the reality is it is going to hurt. If your country, a capitalist colonial country that is an exploiter country, US, European countries, Canada, etc., if you cannot undo the unjust system in your country, right, start producing real goods that the rest of the world wants to trade, as the global slave plantation liberates itself and less resources and the milk and honey is flowing into places like the US, things will get worse for the Americans. And so the horrible, immoral, unjust solution is just to be like, well, let's just keep trying to colonize the world and keep stealing stuff, rather than fix our internal unjust, unequal system inside. But either way, it doesn't really matter. This is what is going to keep happening. Stuff like this. Okay, that's the Sankara one. I'm trying to find the. Air France is in deep financial trouble as it ran into financial losses of 65 million. This is due to millions of euros a day lost. Because why? Because the AES is the term that means the African countries that basically that are liberating themselves from colonialism in this Sahel region. France has decided to continue to mistreat, the AES countries, and now the French airline is having massive losses because they don't control the airlines. They're not making money from airlines in France. Gold mines are being seized by the African countries. Uranium is being seized, right? The gold isn't going out to France and Britain and the U.S. and other countries, especially France in this case. But U.S. is also involved in this. U.S. helped the French to try to reestablish their colonial control of Vietnam in that time. That's part of what the U.S. invaded for, is trying to help it was colonizer solidarity. But that is failing now. Niger Republic and the U.S. and France also work together in Africa, like in Vietnam. Niger Republic accuses Nigeria of attempting to destabilize the country. Nigeria is one of the countries that's still like very complicit. Its government is complicit with the United States and France and other European entities. Sudan is bleeding. There is no little to no mainstream coverage of the deadly ethnic cleansing. So what's happening in the Middle East is happening. There's actually Sudan and Congo also are having massive ethnic cleansing and mass atrocities committed by the U.S. and its colonizer allies. Let's see. 5 countries started strengthening their cooperation with Burkina Faso. That's like another. I'm trying to find like one of the there was an agricultural breakthrough, and I don't that they made, and as I talked about, they have a whole variety of projects: industrialization, agricultural expansion, another nationalization in Mali as the days of privatization slowly come to an end. A Malian company for the development of textiles, which was previously co-owned by the rest of China, has been nationalized by the Malian government. This is a big deal. So that's like another one. According to the Africa Report, it was a German president that requested Tinubu to soft pedal the AS departure to minimize Russia's influence in the region. One thing about Russia's Russia in Africa. One thing about Russia's relationship with AES compared to the ones that they have with the rest is the fact that they do not have to seek permission from Russia before formulating their foreign policies. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso have left ECOWAS. There's nothing left for Germany. ECOWAS was like a colonizer institution to kind of control that whole area. It was a multi-country institution, but this is rapidly being undone. If this spreads throughout the rest of Africa, this is huge because Africa is, huge quantities of the world resources. It's 1 billion people, and there's really, obviously, the colonial capitalist imperialists are making headway in Syria, in the global slave plantation. Well, it's not really a win, right? Because Syria has just kind of become a big mess. In some senses, it is a loss because it was the Syrian axis of resistance. The government has collapsed there, but what result? The U.S. was already still there, stealing oil and agriculture. That's still happening now. The U.S., Turkey, and Israel are going to be fighting in that area. They have extreme far right entities in there, but Syria has 23 million people, right? The U.S. has spent billions of dollars. Operations Timber Sycamore, right? It was part of the U.S. intelligence project to destabilize and destroy the Assad government in Syria. It has collapsed because of all of this attack. But it's taking a huge amount of resources to collapse Syria into kind of a nightmare. Libya, like post U.S. France treachery in Libya situation. But like that there's not, in the long sense, that's not going to make a big difference to the global reorientation of the multipolar world away from a colonial oppressive slave plantation towards win-win cooperation between equal partners on a global scale. If you add up Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, there's more total resources in those 3 countries. The population is over 3 times that of Syria, and it is expanding. Like Chad is being added to this expansion of the African liberation from its colonial hold. So if you count Syria as a loss, the Mali, Burkina Faso, and Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and now Chad, should be counted as wins. You're not going to hear about these countries in most Western media, in most U.S. and U.S. Western vassal media, because it's extremely bad. And if it's kind of like when people don't want people to spread Luigi Mangione memes, right? They want no Western capitalist controlled media don't want anybody spreading UHC, United Healthcare ideas and memes and anything that's what if we took the power back from the rich ruling classes and got rid of them because they're not that strong and their cops are all garbage. They don't know. The cops can't even catch if you unalive a CEO. The cops will just arrest some random guy that doesn't even look like you. That's all that people are learning, right? And so they don't want people to learn that. They also don't want people to learn, oh my God, Africa has 100 million, like huge swath of Africa is just breaking its chains off and just using its resources. It is not being exploited by the U.S. And the U.S. and France can't do anything. All the U.S. and NATO, They can't beat the poorest Arab country, Yemen. Yemen just shot 2 hypersonic ballistic missiles that you can visibly see the most advanced THAAD American and isn't real interceptor, Iron Dome, and the U.S. THAAD completely missed this it's like Mach 8 Palestine 2 missile, right? They not want to show that. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen like Western or like non. I've in Western sources I don't see that much of that. But the thing is like that shatters this myth that the U.S. and its allies have some kind of, and isn't real by extension, right? Which the U.S. gives all the weapons and all the support to even let that little failed project run. These are some kind of great, victorious, unstoppable forces. They're not, right? They're not. Their military is bad. Their missiles are bad. They're not functional. They're not efficient. They're immoral as well as inefficient and not up to the task. And in Africa, it's also the same thing. They can't control the decolonization of Africa. They're going to try to give Nigerian some more money and resources, but not Nigeria, to the little puppet to try to make. They're going to do more treachery and more nastiness is going to happen. But in the greater picture is that this process, the liberation of the slave plantations is happening. Try to find one more about the The Malian government has blocked all gold exports from the Canadian company Barrick, which with immediate effect, Malian authorities accused Barrick of financial misdeeds and are demanding payment of $500 million following an audit that revealed the shortfall of $300 to $600 billion FCFA. So Canada is one of the top countries with the U.S. empire that does a lot of the resource mineral money laundering through the Toronto Stock Exchange, among other things. Some of the biggest resource gold, silver resource companies are traded in the Canadian stock exchanges, and they're headquartered in Canada for reasons of it's just where that happens to be a nice place to park all of that. They're complicit in Africa. Multi tens of billions of dollars of African resources locked up in Canadian companies, and they're also involved in obviously indigenous oppression inside Canada and to extract resources from Native First Nations people in Canada and also in South America. But Mali is showing what is the future, which is that they are saying all foreign exports of gold is stopped. All the gold in Mali is going to stay in Mali from now on. And in fact, Barrick, right, this Canadian company, you are going to pay $500 million for your stealing of our $600 billion of CPA francs, right? So Canada is also going to get squeezed more. So people in Canada of whatever ethnicity, you should think about how you are going to liberate yourself from your slave plantation. You're not as oppressed, not even close, as an African country. But how are you going to get out of your capitalist, colonizer, unjust Canadian government? Canada is, to a large extent, it is the 51st state. It's just a little puppet vassal of America. It does whatever America wants. But America is the vassal of global capital, global wealth, and millionaire class and corruption. So in Canada, like in France, right, the solution is not to try to re-enslave the people at the bottom, the lowest level prison. The solution is to jailbreak all prisons at all levels. To break all chains on all slave plantations inside the master's house and outside. Right? Because the people that are most oppressed at the lowest level of slave plantation, which is places like Mali, Burkina Faso, and etc., they are not going to stop breaking free, which is going to put the squeeze on people higher up the chain, so to speak, in the imperial core. So anyway, I just want to point that out. That's the end because it's late. It's 2:00. I gotta go. There's way more you can learn about this. There's huge things happening. It's hard to keep track of it sometimes, but I try to keep track of some of it. Before I go, I want to point out that what I meant, what this ultimately began about was how the United States has slavery, and slavery has not ended. Modern U.S. slavery, and Alabama, among other prisons, to reiterate, do profit from slave labor in prisons, and across the United States. But also there's an international system of forced labor and stealing of resources for plunder and for profit, and that is also happening at the same time, and these can be in solidarity with each other. Uh, just as a lot of the African civil rights era anti-racism actions, the boycotts, the sit-ins, and that was there was an international connection with the global, what they call the third world, the global south, countries in Africa, and that international solidarity is also important going forward in this time that we're in. And one last thing I want to say, speaking of all of this, is that if you like video games, if you like if Gerald Horne made video games, might be the highest praise I've gotten. And so somebody said that Neofeud and Silver Spoon Games is like if Gerald Horne made video games. If you don't know who Gerald Horne is, Gerald Horne is a black historian, American historian who holds the John J. and Rebecca Moore Chair of History and African American Studies at University of Houston. He also wrote a book specifically that deals with the Pacific, and he has Hawaii is brought up in his work as well. In this book called The White Pacific, U.S. Imperialism and Black Slavery in the South Seas After the Civil War. It's one of many books that's definitely worth reading. I'm a native Hawaiian, so obviously I'm gonna tend towards that. But anyways, I will shout that one out. But there's all of his work is definitely vital to check out. And so Neofeud is 70% off right now. So if you want to play a game that was like if Gerald Horne made video games, that's I don't know if I can fully. It deals with the topics that Gerald Horne discusses for sure. A history of trying to reinterpreting U.S. and Western history through an alternative lens and dealing with the problems of racism and capitalism and slavery and the prison industrial complex and other things. Those are topics that I do discuss, but I'm not at the quality of historian as Gerald Horne for sure. But it is on sale. Neofeud is a game that helps us to pay bills here at the Silver Spoon Cooperative, and it is an anti-capitalist, indigenous-made cyberpunk game. And it is also a game that you can grab on the Steam site. And you can also, if you would like to support us at the Silver Spoon Cooperative, consider leaving even a very short review if you have some time, because it helps us to get the game discovered in the Steam algorithm. You can also get games like Neofeud on the itch.io website over here, and it does help us to keep doing this work. Part of liberating from the chains of the systems that we are in is economic sovereignty, like food sovereignty. We also try to build food sovereignty at the Silver Spoon Cooperative as well. And so Silver Spoon, I don't work for any corporation. I don't work for quote unquote the man. I don't work for U.S. government or nonprofit. Silver Spoon Games is an independent, cooperative indigenous Hawaiian run business where we can say and do what we want. But we do rely on people trying to. We do rely on revenue for people's products, as long as we still have to exist in the capitalist system. So please consider grabbing this game if you have any inclination, or if you want to get a stocking stuffer for your friends for Christmas that play video games. Also, Decolonators is a game where you, speaking of Vietnam in the 1970s, this is a game where you kick capitalist colonizer butts out of your country. This is a game about the jailbreak, prison break from the chains of U.S. and French oppression in Vietnam in the 20th century. And you can get that as well. Also, of course, you can get Woman is a book by Holly, who was raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity, and it critiques that world from the perspective of Mary within the Bible. And of course, you can also give us direct support through Ko-Fi at kofi.com/silverspook. And of course, you can also help us out at patreon.com/Neofeud and give us ongoing support to do. Speaking of food sovereignty, as part of the liberation process, for when the United States inevitably will cut you off from food to starve you to death, as they do to Venezuela, Cuba, and Syria. part of what we do here is make sure that every inch, as much as we can, of the land is as Native Hawaiians is growing as food, medicine, and being used appropriately, managed appropriately according to our Hawaiian values, but also according to our needs to struggle against imperialism in Hawaii, because the United States does try to stop. The United States destroyed Hawaii that grew enough food to feed itself and parts of California at the same time. And the United States has destroyed that. Waikiki is the living destruction of Hawaiian freedom, actually, because it was the most productive area where they installed U.S. oligarch-owned hotels and Japanese-owned hotels over Hawaiian breadbasket. So that's what we're trying to do as well, is to restore our food, because that's part of this process, and also the land and the health of the land, which is being hurt by Lahaina-style wildfires and desertification as the United States capitalism destroys our land. We also work on games like Neofeud 2, which I'm almost done with. I'm very close to being done, and putting on indigenous international panels of various kinds, like Indigenous Thanksgiving 2024. And you can also help us out. You can also follow at Silverspoon Games at wandering.shop and or at Silverspoon Games at mastodon.social on Mastodon. You can also follow on the Blue Sky. You can follow on the Blue Sky at silverspoongames.bsky.social and or at silverspoonguy.bsky.social for the games and the games and personal related stuff, respectively. And on Twitter, of course, you can follow Silverspoon Guy and Silverspoon and or Silverspoon Games. And you can also follow Holly. Oh, you can also follow Terminus C. Terminus C is Terminus Cyberstar, which is a cyberpunk RPG I'm the content director and lead writer for. And you can also follow, of course, Holly at the tech at Allergic to Blue is a writer, producer, moderator here, married to myself, parent of 2, Land Back Free Hawaii supporter. And of course, let's please continue to mask up, because that helps to stop the biological warfare conducted by global Malthusian nasty people, and it supports those in Palestine. And anyways, thank you very much for watching. Thanks so much. Thanks to all these people on the list for your Patreon support. Without your support, it's difficult for us to keep doing this work. So thank you so much. And yeah, until next time, free all the places. Free free actually enslaved peoples of all kinds. So definitely all of the illegally, unjustly incarcerated, disproportionately black and brown prison laborers, prison slaves, basically, in the United States and in the global colonial and neo-colonial prisons of U.S. empire and other imperialist entities that are stealing resources and using unpaid or terribly paid labor under horrible conditions. Let's free all of those people in particular. And as well, keep your shades possibly excellent to each other, and we will